So I might note that this is just an example of how you could do a controversy if you had a long period of time, if it was a capstone type of controversy, and if you wanted to budget 2.5 80-minute class periods. The point is that this length of time was good for me to meet my teaching and learning objectives. The controversy process, or the length of the controversy, really needs to be adapted or altered depending upon what your teaching and learning objectives are. The process could be the same, but you can modify it to fit into a 30-minute session or a 20-minute session. The objectives have to be different, the expectations have to be different, but again, depending upon what your objectives are, the amount of time you have, the process can be altered. So one typical length class period is 50 minutes. And so what I'm going to do is walk you through an example of how the same process that I just described could be modified a bit for a 50-minute class period using a technique that Carl Smith from the University of Minnesota often refers to as active lecturing, but using kind of a problem-based learning format with a structured controversy. So if we were to take the Masai Mara example and using Carl Smith's active lecturing method, or what I believe he often refers to as bookends, and he refers to it bookends because the professor does a lot of organizing material up front, preparation, there's summary at the back, but also there's interjected sections of mini lectures, so to speak, throughout the course period that allows groups to get the necessary information that they need to deal with the controversy, but also for the professor to do some facilitating and presenting new information if it's needed. So this is how it would work, is that initially the professor has to think about their objectives, assessment, what the background is, who the stakeholders are, what type of data do they need. But notice the objectives is the first on that list. Second of all is the timing. What is the amount of time that they're going to need to meet some of those objectives and the number of stakeholders. My suggestion, if you're using a controversy, is start simple. Start with relatively few stakeholders, 2 or 3 max, because it can get complicated. The second part of the process is doing some mini lecturing. And so in the mini lecturing period, you'll express what are your teaching and learning goals and objectives. Why in the heck are we doing this assignment? Make it specifically clear, related to them as practitioners, related to previous materials they've had, or you could present it as a way for them to figure out what they need to learn to deal with future problems. Here is where you're also going to present the background information for the case or controversy. What information do the individuals in your class need to start the case? Some of which you can provide. Other places, maybe you're going to direct them to do some of their own individual or group research. Here you're going to set up stakeholders. So the stakeholder groups can be randomly designed, or they can be designed where you put people into stakeholder groups based on their disciplinary expertise or their major in school. In these stakeholder groups, individuals have to kind of learn the information for their stakeholders. Who are they? What questions do they have for the other stakeholders that are going to allow them to evaluate some of the solutions that other stakeholders are going to present for the controversies? And then as a single stakeholder group, what are potential solutions that they can they think would be viable option to deal with the controversy? You as the instructor may then have to, will probably have to bring it back and talk to the group. Is there additional information needed for the groups? Oftentimes the instructor has to, at this point, emphasize that it's not a debate, but to come up with the best solution to deal with the controversy. Second of all is make sure that it's explicit in terms of what is the task or the goal of the multidisciplinary groups. In essence, to share information, learn from others, and again, to come up with that best solution. So in their multidisciplinary groups, each stakeholder has the same allotted time to talk about their potential solutions, what their justification is for their solution, and questions that they may have for the other stakeholder. This part of the controversy process typically requires some facilitation to make sure that groups are practicing good presentation skills in terms of staying on task, staying within their allotted time period, but also that the other stakeholders practicing the good professional skills of listening, not interrupting, let the person present. After each stakeholder has an opportunity to present their information or ask their questions, then the discussion happens in terms of what do the stakeholders recommend in terms of the best solution, and can they or how will they justify it based on previous content knowledge, data, what have you. After all the groups had their discussions, multidisciplinary discussions, the professor then facilitates a reporting out from groups. And again, this was made explicitly clear to the students at the beginning of the class. What are their solutions? What do they think are still challenges? And as professionals, what questions or data would they like to have to deal with these? And ways in which we can assess this is you can have students present it and actually grade presentations. You can grade it in terms of more of a kind of a participation points that your group did present, but then you can also do more summative type of assessment where you have individual or group papers write about their solutions to the controversies. Last but not least, you as the professor, it's your responsibility to kind of summarize it, to pull the controversy back together. Provide some critique in terms of student responses. Some students may present solutions that are poorly justified. And if so, this is a time to critique what those responses are. Another thing that I found that students want to know is what's really happening. And the best controversies that I found in classes is to use real life controversies, is try not to use fictitious ones or ones that are totally made up. Maybe you could have some that are fictitious that are potentially based on real facts. But if you're using real life controversies, students will want you to spend some time, in the case of our Masai Mara example, knowing what really is happening in the Masai Mara, what's the Kenya Wildlife Service doing, etc. People will want you to, in your critique of their responses, integrate it with what's really happening. I've had some students bring up excellent responses that stakeholders have not considered in real life controversies. But it's really, this is the time for you to bring it to closure. So when we think about the active lecturing or effective lecturing process in using a problem-based learning structure like constructive controversies, again, this is how you might budget your time for a 15-minute class period, but it really can vary, again, based on your lecturing periods. I shouldn't say lecturing, your class periods, and based on your needs in terms of what you want students to do.